Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this special webinar, Exploring MBA Programs at USC Marshall. I'm your host, Christy Blyzeffer of Poets and Quants. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit any questions you have for our panelists, and I'll do my best to get to those at the end of the session. Whether you're looking to accelerate your career, pivot to a new industry, or build leadership skills in a global business environment, today's conversation will help you understand how USC Marshall's MBA options can support your goals. So let's begin by getting to know our panelists. Today, we're joined by Lee Toast, Vice Dean for MBA Programs and Professor of Management and Organization. Hi, Lee.
Good morning.
Scott Abrams, Professor of Clinical Finance and Business Economics and Academic Director for the full-time MBA. Hello, Scott.
Hello, good morning.
And Kelly Scott, Director of MBA Admissions at USC Marshall. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, welcome everybody.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for taking the time today for, what we hope is a very informative and inspiring look at your guys' MBA program for all our prospective students out there who are just now on that journey of picking a school. So let's get started with really what makes USC Marshall's MBA experience unique, both from a program and student perspective. And Lee, we'll start with you. What do you think sets USC Marshall's MBA programs apart from other business schools?
Great question. And I think there are a couple of things I would highlight if I were to just sort of focus down on maybe the top one or two. The first thing I would mention is the Trojan Network. This is probably one of the things that USC as a whole and USC and Marshall in particular is most well known for. So, of course, the Trojan Network just refers to the fact that we have just a massive global network of graduates, not only from USC Marshall, but also from all of the other schools that are housed here at the University of Southern California. We have a ton of alumni, and they are a passionate bunch. And so I think one of the ways that I think that the Trojan Network might be unique relative to other large university-based networks is with respect to not only the quantity of connections, but the quality of the connections. I'll give a couple of examples to help bring this to life. But one of the ways that I try to summarize it when we have new incoming students and I'm trying to help them sort of understand why we call the Trojan Network the Trojan family. So the way I describe it is that the Trojan family is a network, but it has an ethos with it. And that ethos is that we help each other succeed. And we see this in action all the time with our MBA students, with our alums, with our grads. So one of my favorite examples comes from a recent alumni event where we brought together alumni who were working in the entertainment industry. And we had a panel. There was 4 or 5 alumni up there. They were recent grads, not within the last couple years, but maybe 3 to 4 to 5 years out. So they had all sort of gone through that time where they had gotten their first job after, they graduated here from Marshall. They'd gone out, they'd done that job for 2 to 3 years. And then as often as is the case, especially in entertainment, they sort of moved on to a new position. So we asked them in the context of that panel, well, can you guys tell us, how did you find, how did the Trojan Network really play a role in your, career path thus far? And not only had all of those students gotten their first job out of Marshall through the Trojan Network, but 4 of those 5 students had also gotten their second job through connections that they made while they were here at USC Marshall. And so I think that's just a really nice example of how the Trojan Network, you experience it while you're here, but it really does continue to pay off down the road. And then, so the second thing I would highlight that I do think makes Marshall as a full-time MBA experience in particular, but this really unique, but this also applies, I think, to all 5 of our MBA programs, which we can walk you guys through, what are all the programs that we have at some point in this conversation. But many of our programs are intimately sized, right? So take our full-time MBA program. Most classes are around 200 to 210 students. And what our students really love about that is that they can feasibly get to know all of their classmates. And that allows for a much more like sort of intimate type of bonds and connections that really do sort of have a really big impact. And that takes us back to the quality of connections that I was talking about. I'll give one story about that just to sort of help you imagine what that means. This is my favorite. So I'm going to refer back to a specific instance where a student was telling this story. But once I tell it, you'll probably see Scott and Kelly nod because we hear this exact story a bunch of times in a bunch of different contexts. So it's this. So last year at orientation, we had some alums come in to sort of talk about what the Trojan family meant to them. And one of the alumni told a story about when he was on the job market as a USC Marshall student. He was in sort of a waiting area as people were going through interviews. And there was someone who was a USC Marshall student who had just come out of the interview for the same job that other students were there applying for. And the student came out and had been surprised about some of the questions and stopped to share with the other Marshall students, like, hey, you're going in there. This question kind of took me aback. It surprised me a little bit. So I wanted to give you a heads up. So really actually collaborating rather than competing in a way that I think there are a lot of MBA programs that get really competitive. And if that's your thing, that's totally fine. But I find that really here at Marshall, one of the things that if you just stop a random student in the hall and you say, what do you love about your program? One of the things that you're really high on the list likely to get is the way that we have a really collaborative culture. We help each other. Goes back to that idea that we help each other succeed. So I'll stop there. I don't want to go on too long, but those are my two things, Trojan family and the collaborative, like sort of intimate size of our programs, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, well, I think if students are looking for networks, that's certainly an encouraging aspect of the Marshall program. Well, Scott, if you had to narrow it down to maybe one, maybe two differentiators of the Marshall MBA, what would it be?
Sure. So in addition to our small class size, I would point to some of our signature programs. We have a program called Prime. It dates back to 1997. USC was very innovative, and they were the first top business school. Also, we were the first top business school to send our students abroad, to force them to go on this 10-day experiential learning trip on global business. And so I'll talk a little bit about how it works. So we obviously, our full-time MBA program is a 2-year program. At the end of the first year, our 210 students are broken up into 6 or 7 different sections based on rankings, and they'll learn about global business. So they've already taken the classes on marketing and strategy and finance and accounting. So they have all the building blocks. And in the last term, they're learning about global strategy. In addition to the global strategy class, they're in this Prime course. And so they'll learn about, so each section has a different country. So it could be Japan, it could be Korea, it could be Hong Kong, it could be Singapore. And they also, now we've innovated this year where they have a different industry component. And so you'll learn about the country, the politics, the culture, doing business abroad, how, cross-cultural collaboration is very different in different places in the world. And the class ends with this trip. And so literally those of us, I'm teaching one of the sections this year. I'm flying out next Thursday. The students are all flying out, and we will be going to, my trip will be going to Seoul and Hong Kong. And I've been teaching them about the entertainment industry. So Seoul at its peak, learning about K-pop, K-dramas. Hong Kong used to have a big counterpop, and Hong Kong films back in the 80s and 90s. And so anyway, so Prime is a key differentiator, and I could talk about that a little bit more today if people are interested. And then we have other signature programs. We have a student investment fund. Other schools have a student investment fund, but I think ours is really, really special. Right now, the MBAs have between $10 to $15 million, depending on, we're very volatile right now if you're paying attention to the markets. But what makes our program stand out, it is entirely student run. I mean, there is a faculty member, they're teaching, they're learning about investments, but the students are pitching the stocks and the bonds. They're making the asset allocation and the portfolio management decisions, and the faculty member is guiding them. At other schools, they might pitch to a faculty member who then does the portfolio management and stuff like that. So that's really neat. And then another signature program that I would like to highlight is MLFP, Marshall Leadership Fellows Program. It's a year-long course, just like our student investment fund. I didn't mention that was a year-long course that the students will take. So our first year students become part of this program. I think we have 35 or 40 students in it this year. they will take this course at the end of their first year in the spring semester and the beginning of their second year. So they learn how to become leaders. They're taught how to coach. They're taught how to lead in that first semester. They come back after the summer break and they are leaders. They are coaches to our new incoming students. So we break all of the core students, the first years, into core teams of 5 to 6 students. Each team will have a coach that is part of this program. So I would say our signature programs, in addition to our small class size, make us very special.
Are those signature programs available across all the MBAs, or are there certain signature programs for different programs?
Different ones for different programs. The Prime is the one that I was talking about, the international one. All the other MBA programs have copied the full-time program since, and so our part-time program has Globe. iBear has their own version, and so, but the full-time program was the first one that did this.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, let's talk a little bit about who's actually enrolling in the Marshall MBA. What's the class profile look like for the most recent class?
Yeah, so I will say one great thing is there's just a lot of smart people out there applying for business schools, and we're glad that we have a great class full of them. So the class that just landed last fall, fall of 2024, we had about 210 students, very competitive academic profile. It was about 36% women, 35% international students. We want to make sure we have a nice mix there. And our program, especially the full-time program, on average, students will have about 5 years or more. It was about 5.5 last year of relevant work experience post-undergraduate. And also, our industry groups sometimes are pretty typical to a lot of MBA programs. Our largest industry group was actually financial services. We had about 22% of our students coming from there. And we had about 17% coming from technology, which is still hot in spite of all the layoffs. It's still a hot industry to be in. And of course, we talked about media entertainment. That was number 3 at about 11% of our class. And the rest, of course, diversified across any industry that you can think of. We've had a lot of folks in the class. And of course, as far as education, typically you will find business majors tend to be the majority at business schools. Ours was business and commerce at 31%, and followed by engineering and computer sciences at about 20%, and of course, economics at 14%. But one of the things I will highlight, that is just the major top level. But in our program, we've had people that have come from all kinds of walks of life. I've been doing this for more than a decade, I'll just say it this way. And we've had, believe it or not, professional football players in the program. We've had dancers in the professional dancers. We actually have at that time, the world's #1 poker player in our class before. So those things are kind of non-traditional that you would see at a lot of schools, because I think when people are looking at programs, they say, and I've had this question, oh, I don't have any business experience. How am I going to get an MBA? And we try to explain to them the MBA is the one, I can definitely say it's the one degree that cuts across anything that you're going to do. Everything is a business. You're running an art gallery, it's a business. You're doing a TikTok, it's a business. So the business degree is the one great degree that anyone can get at any time, and you will be able to use the skills that you learn in your MBA program.
Yeah, absolutely well said. That diversity of thought is so important in the classroom. And do you find that kind of diversity similar across all the different MBA options that Marshall has, or do you find
Yes, we do. Yes,
Yeah.
we do. It's going to be a little bit more limited in programs that are more localized. Like a part-time program, you're not going to have a lot of global perspective in a part-time program. Online program tends to be a little bit more domestic. But when you're thinking about our programs, our goal is to find those smart, unique students who can take the value of their MBA here at Marshall, become of our network, and be successful in the end. So we don't want to discourage people who may not feel that they're qualified. And I'll give you a quick anecdote too. I'm often surprised by some of the military people who say, well, I don't have any work experience. And I go, well, you were in the military. You were probably working harder than anybody else. That is experience. So it's really interesting to see that mindset coming from military to actually going back into civilian world and realizing your skill set, especially your leadership, is going to be so valuable to in so many different ways.
Absolutely. I think we've covered it lots. The business schools really kind of appreciate the experience the military brings. Well, let's shift to, kind of one of the biggest reasons people may consider an MBA, and that can be for some a career mobility, whether it's a pivot, a promotion, salary bump, whatever. So Lee, what is Marshall doing to help students successfully pivot into maybe a different industry or function?
Yeah, that's such a great question because, for those of us who have been involved in business education, graduate business education for many years, let's just say that, right? If you let's look back a decade. The primary thing that people were using the MBA to achieve was like a promotion. They wanted to sort of elevate their careers, but along the same trajectory they had been on, right? And just increasingly over the last decade, we're seeing more and more people are here to change either industry or function, or sometimes both. I think we are in the full-time MBA program. We're at around 80-ish% of people, maybe even a little bit more, want to do one or another of those pivots.
Wow.
If you look in our part-time MBA program, our PM program, closer to about 50%. So it does vary across our MBA programs, which individuals what's the proportion of students who are looking to pivot. So for that reason, we started really trying to innovate as much as possible in the full-time MBA program first, because we do have that huge proportion of students who want to pivot there. So the newest innovation on that front that we've designed really to help people sort of be able to hit the ground running in a recruiting process for a completely new industry or function for them is something we call the USC Marshall MBA Career Launchpad.
Okay.
So to set the stage for what this is and why we did it, the full-time MBA program at Marshall starts a little earlier than most other programs. So we have our orientation at the end of July. And to give you a sense of how challenging the pivot process can be, let's imagine you are from one of those, non-traditional, you're not in a business background. You're a teacher, let's say. You're a high school teacher. Maybe you did Teach for America and then you've spent some time, but you've decided that you want to go into ed tech or something along those lines, and an MBA is going to help you reach that goal. Okay, so you're coming in with the experience of a teacher and you want to go out and recruit in some specific fields that you don't have a huge amount of knowledge of, say, for example, the lingo that they're using in tech firms right now. What are the most urgent problems they're facing? So part of it is like you got to get a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of understanding really fast. And the second part of it is that really fast part. I'll give you the example that even though we have orientation the last week in July, every year that I have been in this role, I've had students come to me and say, hey, Dean Toast, I have a little bit of a difficulty. Orientation runs until 5 o'clock on Wednesday, but there's a consulting firm downtown that's having a recruiting event at 4. Can I leave early? So just take that in for a second. They haven't had a class yet and they're already recruiting. Right. So how do you handle that? How do you set these students up for success? Because that's our goal, right? We want every student that comes to Marshall to succeed, no matter what the type of pivot they're trying to achieve. And so the MBA Career Launchpad is actually, it weaves into part of orientation and then spills over after orientation. Students this year will be able to choose from 6 different tracks that are very heavily recruited for here at USC Marshall. And so they'll spend a portion of that following week immersing themselves in the recruiting process and practices of a given track that is really a heavily MBA recruiter, with the idea that well before we get to even the end of August, they're really ready to be credible in their coffee chats, their informational interviews. Maybe they thought they wanted to go in ed tech, but they learned a little bit more about it and realized, no, I'm much more into consulting or much more into whatever it is, right? So our goal is really to set them up for success as early as possible. So that's an example of one innovation. You've asked if some of these ideas and programs roll out across the other MBA programs. The first year for the Launchpad in the full-time MBA program was last year. So we've already started talking with some PM students about how to roll it out for the part-time MBA program, and we're starting to move it more broadly throughout our programs. So yeah, that's one example of a number.
Yeah, I think that's a great one because we all know recruiting never stops, it seems like now for these MBA students.
It's true.
If we're talking about kind of the connections between industry and the classroom, can you talk about a little bit how involved faculty are in industry practice or consulting, and how that kind of they bring that to the classroom setting?
Yeah, so we have a great mix of faculty at Marshall. We have top academic researchers. We also have faculty that have come from industry. So it's a nice blend that really shapes the classroom experience. And so our research faculty obviously are bringing cutting edge research into the classroom, like strong strategy, leadership, finance. And then at the same time, you have people such as myself. I came from industry, so we bring our real world company knowledge into the classroom. And so I left where I was working 10 years ago. How do I stay up to date? We have a class that I haven't mentioned yet. Before that prime class, earlier in the spring semester, it's a consulting project class. And so we get real companies. This year we had Disney, Microsoft as a couple examples, and the students are working on cases for the real world business solutions for these companies. And so the faculty are that are teaching this class are staying up to date there. We also have executive education. Some of the faculty do consulting on the side. So all of these things are ways that the faculty stay connected with the business community.
Would you say like most Marshall MBA students will come out with some kind of contact with industry if they going through the program?
Definitely. So, through relationships with faculty, through that consulting project class. And what I didn't mention, the prime class is also working with companies. And so, as an example, the trip that I'm leading next week, we're visiting 10 companies. 7 of them, they've partnered with us, and the students are working on consulting projects. So right now, the students are finishing their slide decks. I told them to finish everything before we get on the plane. And so all of that is ways that the students are connected with companies and industry.
I was just going to add something to that, because one thing to add, like that's just completely in line with what Scott was just describing, is that to take the example of the MBA Career Launchpad that we had last August, we had over 60 alumni come in the course of 1 week to meet our incoming MBA students. So not only did they have those real connections through all of these classes throughout the year that Scott's describing, but they actually had all those connections, like at least 60, right, before Labor Day. So we're really, that it's one of the benefits of the Trojan Network and the alumni's commitment to the program is that they like to come back, and we do try to connect them as much as possible. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelly, from the admissions side, can you talk a little bit about, like beyond the academic credentials and the test scores, how are you assessing a prospect's fit with personality, demands of the MBA, and those other things that make the program right for candidates?
Yes, absolutely. So it's all about engaging these candidates in many different ways. We get their application. It's, technology, flat piece of paper. So how do we get to know a student? So one of the things that we do is in all of our programs, we interview our candidates. And we interview any candidate that we would want to consider for admission to our program. The interview has a lot of different dimensions to it. So it's not just a regurgitation, as you say, of just your work background, but we're trying to understand from them their communication skills. We're trying to understand from them their leadership. What have they been involved in? Have they led teams? And this means you don't necessarily have to have a title as a director to lead a team or be part of a team. But we're looking at their ability to work with a diverse group of people with diverse groups of thought. And so each of the dimensions, when we're talking to that student, we're assessing their ability to not only give us content, but how to give us that content so we can understand their needs in communications and how far they've already gone in communication. Then throughout the year, we will have events, conversion events, where we're inviting our students to come to campus, meet our students. We have a great team of ambassador students that work with us to continue to engage our students, the incoming students in any way. And during those events, this is when we get a chance to kind of talk to them in a less formal setting, just having conversations, just seeing how things flow and see how things fit. And one of the things we do value is we get feedback from our students, right? When we talk to them about, how did you feel about this event? Are these people that you would want to be on a team with? That kind of valuable feedback for us helps us to shape the class and make sure that we try to keep the culture and community that we have here at Marshall. Because the one thing is, you'll hear a lot about the emphasis on the academics. And of course, we want smart people. Every school in this nation wants smart people. But in the end, we also want people who are going to be successful here. Sometimes the smartest person, if you are like a stone introvert, you don't talk to people, it's going to be difficult for you to navigate Marshall because we are such a networking community, and you may find yourself out of place. So those things are very important to us when we're assessing candidates in that way. And we also, our team opens up to sessions. If people have questions, they can come and do counseling sessions with us, and that helps a lot. We always encourage our candidates to try to come in, visit campus, see what the community is like, get to know some of these students. We have class visits where they can come and sit in on a class so they can see what a class is like and make sure they know that this competitive environment is going to be competitive, yet collaborative environment is going to be good for them. So those are some of the ways we try to assess those soft skills in students.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, we're going to switch now to another hallmark of the MBA, and that is leadership. Let's talk about how Marshall develops it, what's its philosophy, how students prepare to lead in diverse environments. And Lee, let's talk about what is the school's general philosophy on leadership, and what are some of the practices you use to achieve this?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. So leadership is one of the sort of core principles that undergirds any MBA program. At Marshall, I would say one of the great features of the program is that students are going to encounter a wide variety of approaches and styles to leadership, both in how they're going to be learning about leadership and leadership issues in the classroom, but also in how they're going to be engaging in leadership activities with their peers. So I think that's really important. Overall, we really want our students to sort of be able to see the complexity of the strategic business landscape, not so much as a threat, but as a catalyst. So we want to help them cultivate the mindset, the skills, and the tools that will really allow them to have confidence when they're sort of leading in dynamic circumstances where change and disruption are sort of perpetual. In order to achieve this, we know that students need both technical and analytic skills, as well as sort of the humanistic orientation to interpersonal influence and leadership that is critical for this sort of human connection, right? To be able to persuade and convince others to follow a path. So we've really designed a curriculum that tries to really allow students to spend time deeply immersing themselves in the really technical skills on the one hand and getting really strong in those. And then at the same time, talking about the interpersonal influence processes that can allow you to deploy those technical skills effectively, right? Like I'll often tell my students, it doesn't matter if you have the best decision analysis in your entire company. If you can't get somebody to listen to you, it doesn't matter, right? You're not going to have an effect. So we try to really bring these things together so that they can balance each other when students are trying to influence and lead within their organizations, within their clubs, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott, building up on that, you did earlier talk about Prime, but what other kind of opportunities are there for students to kind of grow cultural global leadership?
So I'll point out a couple of things. 5 years ago, before I was even in this role as academic director, the school there used to be a course called organizational behavior in the end of the first year, like what we call term 5. The school said, hey, leadership is important. They changed the class into a leadership class, moved it into the first term, and they said, hey, you need to be good leaders. Like, just to echo what Lee was saying, you could be great at finance, you could be great at marketing, but if you can't lead and you can't convey your thoughts, you're not going to be successful in business, whether you're a CEO or whether you're just, a smaller person at a company. So there we have that leadership course. All of our courses focus on global things. Like we made a big effort to incorporate global cases into our courses. So if I'm teaching a finance class, students have traveled, students have come here internationally. Yes, they want to study in the United States, but we got to teach about companies in Asia, companies in Europe, companies in Latin America. So we do that. I mentioned the MLFP program, the Leadership Fellows program, which is one of our signature programs. And lastly, we do a really good job of mixing our students up. Kelly mentioned that I think 35% of our students in this class, our current first years, are international. We don't want the international students just hanging out with each other. We mix them up on their core teams, and we make sure that we teach about different cultures. In that leadership class and in the communication class, I know the instructors cover topics such as like high context versus low context cultures. For an example, the United States is a very low context. We need everything in writing. We say what we think. In Asia, where I'm traveling to, when I was trying to source all these companies, they never tell you no. They'll just say, "Oh, we'll think about it." If they don't want to work with us, that means no. And so we teach these things in the classroom, working with different cultures throughout the business education experience of the MBA program.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way it is now, there's like almost every company is global. So you have to have some kind of context to operate in that. So Scott, sticking with you, do you mind just kind of giving us an overview of the 5 MBA programs at Marshall? And then we'll kind of maybe dive deeper a little bit following that.
Sure. I'll start off and then I'll kick it back to Lee since it's more of her domain. But so we have our full-time program, we have our part-time program, we have our online program, we have an executive MBA program, and we have this one-year international program known as IBEAR. But I'll kick it back to Lee since she's runs all 5 of them.
Yeah,
Oh, great.
sure, of course. Yeah. So it's, with 5 MBA programs, how do you figure out which is the one for you, right? And so I'll try to give maybe just a quick line or two about, how can you understand the primary focus of a given program? So if you want to take roughly 2 years to deeply immerse yourself in the career transformation process, the full-time MBA program is probably the right program for you, right? And that's the one that Scott is the academic director of. I had the career launchpad example and that kind of thing. If you like your current job and you want to keep it while you're getting your MBA, we have several options for you. So we do have a part-time MBA program where students will take classes on campus, either in the evenings during the weeks or on the weekends. We call that our MBA for professionals and managers. Hence, MBA PM is the abbreviation that you'll commonly find. We love abbreviations at USC. So everywhere. I think we're even more amped up about abbreviations at Marshall. So the MBA PM is the part-time MBA program. We also have a really successful online MBA program. Again, just like our other programs, this is a very intimate and unique community where people are really, you think of an online MBA program, and I think a lot of people imagine, it's distance learning. And so all the classes are going to be, you just watch a video all alone, and it's not like that at all. You're doing synchronous class sessions with really dedicated and very involved faculty member. You get to know them. It's a really outstanding experience. We also have, if you're further along in your career, you might want to explore our executive MBA program. It's designed to help high-performing professionals take their leadership skills to a new level as they're progressing towards C-suite level positions. And then finally, I would emphasize that we have one just very unique MBA program that is really not replicated anywhere else in the world, I think. And that is our one-year international IBEAR MBA program. Why is it called IBEAR? Long story, we won't get into it. But essentially, it started out as international students coming to the United States to do research on international business issues. And we found that we had so many incredible students wanting to do that kind of activity that's sort of evolved into this iBear MBA program that's really for mid-career professionals, really intensive experience, but just really, really high impact as well. So that's a quick overview, but I'm happy to go in. If people have questions about any of them in particular, we can definitely go in and dig a little deeper in any of them.
We do have a follow-up from from a viewer, and he just wants to know when the iBear MBA admission application will open for 2026, since 2025 admissions for international students has closed. Does anybody have an answer to that?
Kelly, that's a little more in your domain. Have we set that date yet even?
I don't believe we set that date yet, as they're finally putting the class to bed. So, but it will be, as soon as it is available, it will definitely be published on our website, because of the nature of that program. It's kind of off sequence and start versus our other programs. So it should be opening up relatively soon once this class is put to bed.
Yeah, so absolutely get your, reach out and get on their radar so they can alert you when that opens. And Kelly, going back to you, what advice would you give applicants trying to align their values and goals with the right program? What questions should they ask? What should they look for? Who should they talk to?
Yeah, so I think, as you think about the profile of the different MBA programs and the typical class profile of like work experience and things that they want, you need to kind of do an assessment of yourself starting out. There's like 3 areas that I talk about to students on how to evaluate. It starts with evaluation. And I mean, by evaluation, I mean self-evaluation. You need to be a little bit introspective to kind of figure out, why do you want to be on this journey in the first place? What is your outcome? Are you trying to career pivot? Are you trying to stay within your career? And also think about the flexibility of your learning style and what you want to do. An online program, if you want the flexibility of an online program where you work fully all day and do your classes in a comfortable environment, that's one thing. You also have, like a part-time program where you're going to be in person, you come to campus. Even though you're working, you're going to come to campus. And of course, a full-time, do you want to take the opportunity cost of quitting your job and going to school for 2 years? So it kind of starts with that self-evaluation and what is your level of risk that you want to take in these programs. And then the second piece, I always call it effort. How much effort are you willing to take to to submit a really powerful application to an MBA program? I suspect most people apply to multiple programs, more than one program. There is getting documentation from your academics. There is writing essays. There is putting, getting engaged with information sessions and getting engaged with the campus. So you need to be able to find time to put effort into the program. And I will tell you this, we can tell a student who just kind of decided to apply for the sake of applying, like they've done no research on the program, they have no idea what they want to do. So you really need to go ahead and put some effort into figuring out what is going to be a good place for you and what program is great for you. And then the third piece is enthusiasm, your attitude. Are you really doing this because someone told you you have to do it? Are you doing this because you really want to get this MBA and you do see it as a way to pivot yourself to the success that you want? You don't want to be in a process where you really don't want to be there. It's a competitive process. There's a lot of people who are very extroverted. They're very networky. They talk a lot. You need to come and visit these classes. You need to really talk to students. Like, we consider them our mainline people to help anyone decide whether or not an MBA is right for them, because they give them that firsthand experience. This is what it's like in the first year. We always use that analogy of, it's like, trying to drink water through a fire hose. It's so true though. A lot of times when we get people who are very, very smart, they'll say, oh, I can handle it. I did this in my undergrad, and then they go into the core program in the MBA and they realize, oh my goodness, it's a lot more like boot camp than I thought it was going to be. So you really need to understand all those different things before you submit to a program and before you start applying. And then after that, I would always say, we know that there's a lot of chat boards out there. We know that there's a lot of blogs out there. The information may or may not be the best, but where are you going to get the best information? From your friendly neighborhood admissions office. So if you have questions about the program, be sure to contact us in admissions and ask those questions, because I can tell you so many stories of people who said, I heard that this, well, I don't know what you heard, but that is incorrect. We don't do that. So definitely those are some areas to kind of think about. And the last thing I will say in light of all of this is engagement. You really need to be involved. You can't be that passive person who just submits an application and just sits back and hopes that they're going to get a decision that they like. People need to get to know you. People need to get to understand you. And also, we would not want someone to come to Marshall and realize, wait a minute, this is not the culture I want to be in. We want people who want to be here. So you have to make sure you're understanding and getting the information that you need to make the best decision on your MBA journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of students talk about, knowing your why, like the reasons you're getting an MBA, and that can help direct you into the program, the school that, is really a good fit and not just about the letters, but the experience.
Correct.
So, well, to wrap up, let's maybe zoom out a little bit. Marshall students are not just Marshall students, they're USC students and with an incredible USC ecosystem. So Lee, tell us a little bit about USC is a major research university, strong global presence. How does Marshall MBA students benefit from that broader expertise?
Yeah, that's a really great observation about USC and Marshall being at USC is a really sort of critical feature for many of our students. So USC has top ranked programs like in engineering, medicine, public policy, cinematic arts, communications, the sciences, like you can kind of go on and on. So our students benefit from that in a variety of ways. First of all, by taking elective classes outside of Marshall. So for each of our programs, there are opportunities that they can take elective classes in any of these other schools. Many of them do like a certificate. So we have the Business of Cinematic Arts certificate. We have a real estate investing certificate. The Cinematic Arts School obviously runs the Business of Cinematic Arts, and the Price School of Public Policy runs the certificate for real estate investing. So those are two really popular certificates that our students participate in. You can think of a certificate basically as a specialization with additional documentation on top of your MBA diploma, right? So those are probably the two ways, by taking additional classes and by doing one of their certificates. But there's also just a ton of networking events, right? So they can network at the School of Cinematic Arts or at the Annenberg School for Journalism, at Viterbi at the School for Engineering. So networking events, visiting speakers, all of these types of things are available to all of our students. And I think that's an important feature for sure.
Yeah. Scott, are there any resources that you can add to that list, centers of excellence or things that the MBAs really have interaction with?
Yeah, so just to piggyback on what Lee was saying, we do have centers of excellence within Marshall. Like we have a center for investment studies, we have our entrepreneurship center, and then we do have centers, like there's a center on Asian studies, there's a center on different things within the different schools that Lee was mentioning. I do want to piggyback on one thing that Lee was mentioning. Not only can you do a graduate certificate in another school, as well as within Marshall, is our students have partnered, our organizations have partnered with other schools to put on some events. One event that we had in recent years was E2, the Evolution of Entertainment. It was a partnership between Marshall, Annenberg is the School of Communication, and then the School of Cinematic Arts, Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, was there. There was the session moderated by the dean of Annenberg, Willow Bay. And so anyway, so students really like to do these things with other schools. They have events with the law school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of the wider USC community.
Very, very good. And Kelly, what are some of the key things you suggest prospective students consider when deciding where to apply?
Yeah, so we talked about the things to have them thinking about their success. But the number one thing is you have to visit the school. You have to see if this is going to be a fit for you. Because I will say this, there's a lot of great MBA programs across this nation. We think we're one of them. We're one of the best. But you have to come and see what your environment is going to be like. What are people, what is the culture of the people that you're going to work with? Because the way we look at it, everyone is smart. Everyone can do the work. We hope everyone can do the work, but your experience is very important in the MBA program, because this is when you're starting to make even more lifelong connections. I'll confess, I'll give you a story, because I'm actually an alum of USC Marshall, and I did my degree some years ago. I did the MBA program, and through the years, I have been invited to be an investor in companies with some of my fellow classmates. I am now godmother to some of their children. I mean, we formed these bonds and these connections that are just lifetime. They're just lifetime. So I would say the number one thing is definitely, if you can't visit the campus, if you live far away, you just can't come, you've got to engage somehow. We have our ambassador students. You can go online and you can actually see them all with their profiles. You can connect with them. You can try to find someone maybe with a background like yourself. So you can say, well, I had this background. Was it hard for you to transition with this background versus, someone else with a different background? So we try to provide those outlets for you to engage anyway, to really, really get that information and make sure, should you decide if Marshall's going to be the place for you, it's the right place for you. So that's what we try to do.
Wow, as an admissions director, to have that kind of experience to share, that's really great, valuable. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and of course, thanks to our viewers for some questions and for tuning in, and of course, thanks to our USC Marshall panelists for your time and expertise and really, really insightful information about the options at UC Marshall. If you'd like more information about Marshall's MBA programs, make sure you visit their website, reach out to the admission folks, as Kelly said, or follow up at poetsandquants.com. We have a lot of deep dives into programs like Marshall's, and you can also see more webinars like this on our YouTube channel. So again, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.